You felt it shifting, didn't you? Something inside you moved, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly. You are not here by accident. You did not stumble onto this message. You were led, because something is waking up in you. Not ego, not rebellion, not arrogance, authority. And it has been buried for years. You have always known you were different. You tried to fit in. You tried to shrink. You tried to explain yourself so others would feel comfortable. But comfort was never your assignment. You are not ordinary. You never have been. The world trained followers, heaven-marked leaders, and now something ancient is stirring again. You feel less apologetic, less desperate to be understood, less interested in approval. Have you noticed the validation you once craved now feels small, childish, almost foreign? That is not pride. That is restoration. There are 9 signs you are reclaiming the original divine power that was hidden from followers. 9 confirmations that you are stepping back into what was always yours. Listen carefully. Not everyone will understand this message. Only the chosen recognize this frequency. If this resonates, stand firm. Subscribe. Align yourself with truth, because what is rising in you will require reinforcement. This is not casual content. This is activation. First, you no longer seek permission to be who you are, and that realization is not small. There was a time you explained yourself constantly. Why you think differently, why you move differently, why you see what others ignore. You watered yourself down to be digestible. You felt rejection. You felt misunderstanding. You felt the sting of isolation. But look at you now. Something shifted. You stopped asking. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped defending your existence. That is a sign. The enemy thrives on insecurity. Darkness feeds on doubt. But when divine power awakens, it does not beg for agreement. It stands. You feel authority rising from within you. Not loud, not aggressive. Quiet, certain, rooted. You walk into rooms differently. You speak less, but when you speak, it carries weight. You do not rush to prove yourself anymore. Why? Because you are remembering who sent you. External validation now feels irrelevant, almost childish. You see how the system trained you to crave approval, likes, praise, permission. Followers wait to be chosen. The chosen do not wait. You are no longer looking for someone to authorize what heaven already confirmed. Do you understand how powerful that is? The need to explain yourself is dissolving because you no longer doubt your assignment. You are not defensive. You are settled. That settlement is spiritual maturity. Isolation used to feel like rejection. Now it feels like alignment. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand out without trying. And here is the revelation. When you stop seeking permission, you break a chain. A psychological chain, a spiritual chain, a generational chain. The warfare around you increases when you stop asking for approval. Have you noticed resistance rises? People shift. Energy changes. That is not coincidence, that is confirmation. Darkness senses when someone stops kneeling. You are reclaiming original authority, not dominance, not ego, authority. The kind that moves without noise, the kind that does not argue, the kind that knows. And this is only the beginning. Second, isolation no longer feels like rejection. It feels strategic. And that realization changes everything. There was a season when the silence hurt, when invitations stopped, when conversations grew distant, when people you once stood beside could no longer stand near you. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were too much, too intense, too different. But now you see it. The separation was not accidental. It was intentional. You were not being pushed out. You were being pulled aside. The world calls it loneliness. Heaven calls it refinement. Do you feel the difference? You no longer panic when the room grows quiet. You no longer chase seats at tables that shrink your spirit. You no longer dilute your depth just to keep shallow company. That is not pride. That is awakening. Conversations that once entertained you now exhaust you. Surface talk feels heavy. Noise feels invasive. Smallness feels suffocating. Why? Because your spirit has expanded, and expansion requires space. Isolation used to feel like warfare. Now you recognize it as favor. Darkness isolates to weaken, but divine strategy isolates to strengthen. There is a difference. The enemy isolates to make you doubt your worth. God isolates to remind you of it. You are being refined away from noise, refined away from distraction, refined away from dependency. You are learning to hear your own voice again. And more than that, you are learning to hear His. Listen, the crowd trains followers. Solitude builds leaders. When you are constantly surrounded, you absorb other people's fears, other people's limits, other people's ceilings. But when you are alone, your vision stretches, your thoughts deepen, your discernment sharpens. You start recognizing energies instantly. You sense manipulation before it forms. You detect deception before it speaks. That clarity is born in quiet places. Not everyone will understand this. They will call you distant. They will call you withdrawn. They will say you changed. You did. You stopped needing noise to feel significant. You stopped mistaking access for alignment. And here is the revelation. When isolation feels strategic, it means you trust the process. You trust that what is being removed is necessary. You trust that what is falling away cannot go where you are going. You trust that solitude is not absence, it is preparation. Warfare tried to convince you that you were abandoned. Favor was building endurance. Warfare tried to label you unwanted. Destiny was setting you apart. Do you see it now? You were never rejected. You were reserved. Reserved for greater clarity. Reserved for deeper authority. Reserved for a calling that cannot be built in crowded rooms. Stand firm in that. Do not run back to noise because silence feels uncomfortable. Silence is sharpening you. Silence is fortifying you. Silence is teaching you who you are without applause. And when you step back into rooms again, you will not enter as someone seeking connection. You will enter as someone carrying presence. That shift is dangerous to darkness, and this is only deepening. Third, old fears are surfacing, but they no longer control you. And that is not regression, that is exposure. Have you noticed it? Memories you buried are rising. Insecurities you thought were gone are whispering again. Old wounds are being touched. For a moment you wondered if you were going backward. You are not. You are going deeper. Darkness hides in what is unexamined. Light exposes what is ready to be healed. And you are no longer running from what surfaces. That is the shift. There was a time when fear dictated your decisions. You avoided confrontation. You silenced your voice. You shrank to stay safe. Fear felt like authority, but now you see it. You feel the trigger. You feel the tremor. But you do not bow. You observe it. That is power. When you can observe fear without obeying it, you have stepped into dominion. The enemy relied on unconscious reactions, automatic surrender, invisible chains. But those chains are being revealed. Deep-rooted insecurities are surfacing rapidly because they cannot survive where you are going. They must come up. They must be seen. They must be named. And here is the revelation. Exposure is not attack, it is preparation. You are being shown every weak place not to shame you, but to fortify you. Warfare intensifies before elevation. The closer you move to destiny, the more darkness attempts one final intimidation. Have you felt that pressure? That sudden wave of doubt that seems louder than usual? That is not proof of weakness. That is proof of proximity. You are approaching a new level of authority, and fear knows it is losing ground. You used to identify with your insecurities. I am anxious. I am not enough. I always mess this up. Not anymore. Now you say this is fear speaking. This is old programming. This is not my identity. Do you understand how dangerous that is to darkness? You are separating yourself from the lie. Light versus darkness. Truth versus distortion. Chosen versus condition. The world obeys its fears. You are confronting yours. That is not common. That is rare. That is marked. And when fear surfaces now, you do not collapse. You stand. You breathe. You let it pass through without taking residence. That is spiritual maturity. Darkness feels revealed, not dominant. It used to feel overwhelming. Now it feels exposed, weak, predictable. You see the pattern. You recognize the tactic. And recognition breaks power. Listen carefully. If old fears are surfacing, it is because your new level cannot carry old chains. They are being evicted. Do not panic when they rise. Do not retreat. Stand firm. You are not unraveling. You are upgrading. And what is coming next will require a version of you that no longer flinches. Fourth, you feel resistance intensify the moment you step forward. Not before, not when you were quiet, not when you were doubting, but the second you rise, opposition rises with you. Have you noticed the pattern? You make one bold decision, you draw one clear boundary, you take one aligned step toward your calling, and suddenly misunderstanding, pushback, delays, strange tension in the air. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. Darkness does not resist what is irrelevant. The enemy does not waste energy on the ordinary. Resistance is evidence. The moment you grow, something pushes back. Friends become distant. Allies grow silent. People who once applauded you now question you. Subtle withdrawal, subtle shade, subtle attempts to make you second-guess yourself. Why now? Because your expansion threatens comfort. Light exposes what darkness hoped would stay hidden. And when you carry light, exposure follows you. Unexpected obstacles appear without logical cause. Doors that were open suddenly close. Plans stall. Finances tighten. Energy feels tested. You ask yourself, why is this happening now? Because you moved. Because you obeyed. Because you stepped into alignment. Warfare increases exactly where your calling strengthens. Read that again in your spirit. The pressure is not random, it is targeted. It shows up around your voice, around your discipline, around your growth, around your courage. The attack locates your assignment. This is where many retreat. They interpret resistance as a red light, but you are not many. You are chosen. Resistance for the ordinary means stop. Resistance for the chosen means advance. Understand this. When darkness senses divine power being reclaimed, it attempts intimidation, confusion, delay, distraction. But intimidation only works if you shrink. And you are no longer shrinking. You feel the warfare. Yes, but you also feel something else. Strength, clarity, resolve. You are no longer surprised by opposition. You expect it. And expectation removes fear. Light versus darkness. Calling versus comfort. Favor versus warfare. You are experiencing both. That is how you know this is real. If you were outside destiny, it would be easier. If you were average, it would be quieter. But you are neither. You are marked. And marked individuals trigger resistance simply by progressing. Do not misinterpret the friction. Friction builds fire. Fire refines gold. You are being refined under pressure, not crushed by it. Stand firm. Do not retreat when it gets heavy. Do not doubt when misunderstanding surrounds you. The increase in warfare is proof that your power is being restored. And restoration shakes systems. It disturbs complacency. It exposes hidden agendas. You are not being blocked, you are being tested. And every test is building unshakable authority. This is deeper now. The stakes are rising. And what awakens next will shift how you move entirely. Fifth, your intuition has become sharper than external advice. And this is where power awareness begins. You feel it, don't you? You walk into a room and something shifts. No words spoken, no obvious signs, but you know, energy changes, atmosphere tightens, motives whisper before mouths open. You used to ignore that. You used to second guess it. You would say, I'm overthinking, I'm being dramatic. Maybe I'm wrong. Not anymore. Now you pause. Now you observe. Now you trust what rises in your spirit before anyone confirms it. That is not paranoia. That is discernment. Darkness moves subtly. Manipulation hides behind charm. Deception dresses like opportunity. But you sense it early, before the contract, before the betrayal, before the trap fully forms. You sense it. That is not coincidence. That is restoration. Your guidance no longer depends on consensus. The crowd says move. Your spirit says wait. The crowd says trust. Your spirit says watch. The crowd says it looks good. Your spirit says look deeper. And you listen. This is where followers separate from the chosen. Followers require agreement. Chosen require alignment. You are no longer desperate for outside confirmation. Advice can be useful. Wisdom can be valuable. But your primary compass is internal now. Immediate, clear, direct. Have you noticed how fast the knowing comes? Sometimes it is a whisper. Sometimes it is a pressure in your chest. Sometimes it is a sudden clarity that cuts through confusion like light through fog. That is divine instinct awakening. The enemy relied on your disconnection. When you doubted yourself, you were easier to steer. When you ignored your intuition, you were easier to deceive. But now you sense deception before it speaks. You feel dishonesty before it forms. You recognize envy before it acts. That makes you dangerous. Not loud, not aggressive, dangerous in clarity. Because clarity disrupts hidden agendas. Light versus darkness. Discernment versus manipulation. Calling versus control. You are no longer easily influenced. You are internally anchored. And here is the revelation. When your intuition sharpens, it means your authority is returning. Authority does not only speak outwardly, it governs inwardly. You are being led from within, not by fear, not by impulse, but by alignment. That alignment will isolate you further. Not everyone will understand why you say no. Not everyone will understand why you step back. Not everyone will understand why you move differently. They are not supposed to. Only the chosen recognize this frequency. Trust what you sense. Honor the pause. Obey the nudge. Because what is awakening in you now is not just survival instinct, it is spiritual intelligence. And what that intelligence exposes next will demand even greater courage. Sixth, you are breaking loyalty to systems that once defined you. And this is not rebellion, it is remembrance. There was a time when you defended structures that kept you small. Beliefs you inherited, labels you accepted, roles you performed. You wore them because they were handed to you. Family expectations, cultural narratives, religious patterns, social hierarchies. You thought that was identity, but now it feels tight, artificial, restrictive. Old identities feel like costumes you outgrew, and you can barely breathe inside them anymore. Have you noticed the discomfort, the subtle tension when you repeat phrases you no longer believe? The inner resistance when you follow rules that silence your spirit? The exhaustion from pretending agreement? That discomfort is not confusion, it is awakening. Light is pressing against limitation. Darkness prefers obedience without awareness. Systems reward conformity. Heaven rewards alignment. And you are choosing alignment. You question traditions you once defended. Not to be argumentative, not to be superior, but because truth is calling you deeper. You are no longer impressed by authority that lacks integrity. You are no longer loyal to narratives that shrink your spirit. You withdraw, not dramatically, quietly, intentionally. You stop participating in conversations that require you to betray your discernment. You stop upholding ideas that contradict what you now know in your spirit. That shift is costly. Some will call you unstable. Some will call you deceived. Some will say you changed. You did. You stopped confusing structure with truth. Listen carefully. Breaking loyalty to systems is not dishonor. It is evolution. Warfare intensifies when you detach from control, because control loses leverage. When you no longer depend on approval from systems, they cannot manipulate you with rejection. When you no longer crave belonging inside structures, they cannot threaten you with exclusion. Do you see the power in that the world trains followers to defend the cage? The chosen recognize when the cage was never sacred. You are not anti-structure. You are anti-deception. You are not abandoning wisdom. You are abandoning limitation. That makes you spiritually dangerous, because systems survive on repetition, and you have begun to think independently. Truth over conformity, alignment over tradition, calling over comfort. You feel it pulling you. A higher standard, a purer frequency, an inner compass that refuses to bow to outdated frameworks. This is where favor and warfare collide. Favor pulls you upward. Warfare tries to guilt you backward. Stand firm. You are not losing your foundation. You are reclaiming your original one. And once you fully detach from what defined you, you will begin to redefine environments just by entering them. That shift is coming. Seventh, your presence is disrupting environments without words. You do not have to announce yourself anymore. You walk in, and something shifts. Conversations change tone. Energy tightens. Certain people grow restless. You feel it immediately. Have you noticed how some react to you before you even speak? Irritation, defensiveness, over-explaining. You did nothing. You said nothing. Yet something in them responded. That is not imagination. That is impact. Light does not argue with darkness. It exposes it. Your silence now feels louder than their noise. You used to think influence required volume. It does not. Authority does not shout. It stands. And when you stand in awareness, hidden motives begin to surface. People reveal themselves around you. Secrets slip, masks crack, insecurities flare. You are not attacking, you are illuminating. That is why environments feel different when you enter. Rooms either calm down or become agitated. There is rarely neutral, because neutrality dissolves around clarity. You carry a frequency, a spiritual weight, a presence that presses on deception without trying. That is why some withdraw. That is why some overcompensate. That is why some try to challenge you subtly. Darkness feels uncomfortable under exposure, and you are exposure. This is where you realize something deeper. You are not just reclaiming power internally, you are radiating it externally, without effort, without force, without performance. That is divine authority. The world understands charisma, but this is not charisma. This is anointing. Anointing unsettles what is false. Anointing stirs what is hidden. Anointing activates what is aligned. When you walk into spaces now, you do not blend in. You define the temperature. Not because you demand attention, but because your alignment is stable. People can feel stability. They can feel conviction. They can feel when someone is no longer fragmented. And that stability challenges unstable foundations. Do you see why warfare increased? It was never just about your thoughts. It was about your presence. You are spiritually protected and spiritually dangerous to deception. The enemy cannot silence what does not require noise. That is why attempts to suppress you failed. That is why exclusion did not erase you. That is why isolation did not weaken you. You became stronger in silence. Now your silence carries weight. Hidden motives surface around you because truth has entered the room. You are not hunting shadows. Shadows react to light. Stand firm in that. Do not shrink your presence to keep others comfortable. Do not dim your frequency to avoid tension. You are not here to maintain illusion. You are here to disrupt it. And this is only intensifying, because what is awakening next is not just presence, it is inheritance. Eighth, you feel an ancient strength awakening within you. Not new, not borrowed, not learned, remembered. There is a power rising in you that feels familiar, like something you knew before the world told you who to be. Have you felt that quiet surge in your chest? That grounded certainty in your spine? That calm fire behind your eyes? It does not feel like hype. It feels ancient. It feels inherited, as if your spirit is stepping back into a role it never truly forgot. This is not ego. Ego is loud and fragile. This is steady, rooted, unshaken. Confidence is rising in you, but without arrogance. You do not feel the need to dominate. You feel the need to align. That is the difference between worldly power and divine inheritance. Worldly power performs. Divine power remembers. You are remembering. You sense something activating, a lineage, a mantle, an assignment that stretches beyond this moment. You feel aligned with something eternal, not temporary. Temporary approval no longer moves you. Temporary setbacks no longer define you. Temporary warfare no longer intimidates you. Because what is rising in you is older than the obstacle, older than the rejection, older than the system that tried to contain you. Do you understand what that means? Darkness works within time. Pressure, delay, distraction. But you are tapping into something outside of time. Purpose that existed before opposition. Calling that was written before resistance. This is why fear is losing its grip. This is why isolation strengthened you. This is why warfare could not erase you. You are carrying inheritance. Not money, not status, inheritance of authority, inheritance of sight, inheritance of spiritual weight. And it feels unstoppable because it is not self-generated, it is divinely sourced. You are not trying to become powerful, you are uncovering the power that was always embedded in you. That is why it feels natural. That is why it feels steady. That is why it does not exhaust you. You are no longer striving, you are aligning. Light versus darkness. Inheritance versus imitation. Eternal versus temporary. You feel the eternal anchoring you. When chaos moves around you, you remain centered. When opinions fluctuate, you remain grounded. When warfare circles, you remain protected. Because this strength is not circumstantial, it is covenantal. Let that settle in you. You are not surviving by chance. You are standing by design. And when ancient strength awakens, suppression becomes impossible. You cannot unknow what you now feel. You cannot shrink back into ignorance. You cannot return to smallness. Something in you has locked into place. Something in you has stood up. And what stands up now cannot be pushed down easily. The final layer is approaching, and it will demand everything you have just remembered. Ninth, you realize the power was never lost. It was suppressed. That is the final revelation. They did not steal it. They buried it, under conditioning, under fear, under systems designed to train followers, not rulers. You see it now, the patterns, the programming, the subtle shaping of your mind to doubt what was always within you. You were taught to outsource authority, to wait for permission, to shrink brilliance, to normalize disconnection. That was not weakness, that was design. But spiritual amnesia is breaking. You remember who you are, not intellectually, spiritually. You feel destiny reclaiming you with urgency, not tomorrow, now. There is a pull on your life that feels heavier than preference, heavier than comfort, heavier than convenience. And you understand something sobering. Reclaiming this power will cost you. Comfort will fall away. Certain relationships will dissolve. Illusions will shatter. You will outgrow rooms you once begged to enter. You will walk away from spaces that once defined you, and you will not be able to explain it to everyone. Because not everyone is meant to awaken, but you are. You cannot go back to ignorance. You cannot unknow what has been revealed. You cannot pretend you do not feel the inheritance rising in your bones. This is where the line is drawn. Light versus darkness. Memory versus suppression. Chosen versus conditioned. You were never average. You were restrained. You were never incapable. You were distracted. You were never powerless. You were interrupted. And now the interruption is ending. Stand still and feel it. That steadiness, that clarity, that fire that does not flicker anymore. Darkness tried to convince you that you were small, but small does not survive what you survived. Small does not endure the warfare you endured. Small does not rise after repeated resistance. You are still here, still standing, still aware. That is proof. You are not reclaiming something foreign. You are reclaiming something original. An original cannot be replicated. It cannot be erased. It cannot be permanently suppressed. You are fully awakened now, spiritually protected, divinely assigned. Set apart beyond reversal. The struggle was preparation. The rejection was redirection. The isolation was fortification. Every attack refined you. Every delay strengthened you. Every misunderstanding clarified you. Nothing was wasted. Listen carefully. You are chosen, not fragile, not accidental. Chosen, protected by design, marked by purpose, dangerous to deception, aligned with eternity. Comment 9 if you feel this activation sealing in you. Declare it, own it, stand in it. Subscribe if you are ready to continue walking in what was hidden but is now revealed. Because this is not the end. This is ignition. You were never ordinary. You were never random. You were always meant to remember. And now that you have remembered, nothing formed against you will stand.